It was past midnight when the neighborhood fell silent. But I wasn't asleep. I was waiting. Tonight, the so-called HOA Queen would learn humility. For weeks she ruled our street with fear, notes, and fines. But under those dim streetlights, I had the upper hand, and a plan she'd never expect. When I first moved into the neighborhood, I imagined peace, barbecues on weekends, kids riding bikes, maybe the occasional block party. The houses looked perfect, the lawns trimmed, and the streets eerily quiet. But it didn't take long before I realized who really controlled this place. Everyone whispered about her, the self-appointed HOA Queen. She wasn't on the board, not officially. But she knew the bylaws better than anyone, and she used them like weapons. Every neighbor walked on eggshells, terrified of her late-night inspections and those yellow notices that appeared like curses taped to doors. At first, I thought the rumors were exaggerated. How bad could one person be? But then I saw it. Neighbors repainting their shutters after a single complaint. Families fined for kids' toys left on porches. Even someone forced to remove a small garden because she claimed it broke uniformity. She smiled when she spoke to you in public, but her eyes were sharp, always calculating. I wasn't even on her radar yet, but deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before she found something about me she didn't like. The first clash came sooner than expected. One morning, I stepped outside to grab the mail and found a bright yellow notice taped to my door. My crime? Apparently, the color of my mailbox wasn't an HOA-approved shade of black. I laughed at first, thinking it was a mistake. But then I noticed the fine amount scribbled at the bottom. $100. $100 for a mailbox. I marched across the street where she was pruning her roses with that smug little smirk. "Oh, I see you got your first warning," she said sweetly, like she was handing out candy instead of penalties. I tried reasoning with her. I told her the mailbox was the same one installed by the builder, the exact same style everyone else had. She tilted her head, feigning sympathy, and replied, "Rules are rules, dear. Maybe it's time you learned how we do things here." That condescending tone sent a chill down my spine. I wanted to argue, but I quickly noticed blinds shifting, neighbors peeking from behind curtains. They weren't going to help me. They'd already been beaten down by her tyranny. I paid the fine, but inside I made a decision. This wasn't just about a mailbox anymore. It was about standing up to someone who thought she could bully an entire neighborhood into submission. Once she knew I wasn't going to bow down easily, the attacks escalated. Every week brought a new violation. My trash cans left out too long, grass a quarter-inch taller than regulation, even a supposed noise complaint when I played music on a Saturday afternoon. It didn't matter what I did. She found a reason to fine me. Letters piled up, each one nastier than the last, until my mailbox became a place I dreaded opening. What made it worse was the way she announced my infractions at HOA meetings, calling me out like some criminal while the board nodded along. She had everyone convinced that I was a troublemaker, a bad neighbor who didn't respect the community. But behind closed doors, it was different. Neighbors whispered apologies when no one else was around. "We're sorry," one mother told me quietly. "She's been like this for years. We're just trying to avoid her wrath." That's when I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself. She had an entire neighborhood living in fear of her clipboard and bylaws. And the more she came after me, the more determined I became. I stopped paying the smaller fines, challenging every violation in writing. I documented everything, took photos, and kept copies of her letters. At night, while she thought she was tightening her grip, I was preparing. Because if she wanted a war, I was going to give her one. I knew brute force wouldn't work. She thrived on confrontation, loved it when people yelled because then she could label them unruly. No, I needed a smarter way. So, I did what she'd never expect. I started reading. I got my hands on the HOA bylaws, all 200 pages of them. First, it was painful. Who actually wants to read legal jargon about fence heights and paint colors? But then I found it. Hidden deep in Section 14, there was a clause that limited how fines could be enforced without a full board vote. Not only that, but many of her so-called violations weren't even enforceable under state law. She'd been bluffing all along, counting on people's ignorance. I began small. I filed official appeals, quoting exact page numbers. The board didn't like it, but they couldn't ignore me. My mailbox fine? Overturned. My grass-length violation? Dismissed. With each small win, her smile faded. She'd expected me to roll over like everyone else, but instead, I was exposing her for what she really was. A bully in pearls. The final piece of my plan came when I discovered she wasn't even a board member anymore. She'd resigned months earlier but continued to parade around like she had authority. Legally, she was nothing more than a nosy neighbor. That was my golden ticket. I decided to wait for the next HOA meeting, the one where she always sat front and center, handing down judgments like a queen on her throne. That night would be the end of her reign. The night of the meeting felt like a courtroom drama. Neighbors filled the small community center, whispering nervously as the queen strutted in with her stack of notes. She wasted no time calling me out first. "Once again," she began, "we have a resident who refuses to comply." Her voice dripped with superiority. But I wasn't rattled. I stood, calm and collected, holding a binder thicker than hers. When she listed my supposed violations, I countered each one with photos, dates, and bylaw citations. Murmurs spread through the room as people realized I wasn't bluffing. Finally, I pulled out the trump card. Her resignation letter, obtained through a neighbor who kept old records. "You've been pretending to enforce rules you no longer have the authority to touch," I said, my voice steady but loud enough for everyone to hear. Gasps filled the room. Her face turned pale, her mouth opening but no words coming out. For the first time, the queen had no power. The board members shifted uncomfortably, clearly embarrassed. And just like that, the spell she'd cast over the neighborhood was broken. The aftermath was delicious. She stormed out of the meeting, red-faced and humiliated, while neighbors exchanged stunned glances. The board quickly distanced themselves from her, admitting she'd overstepped for years. Some even apologized to me privately. Within days, the endless violation notices stopped. The street felt lighter, freer, as if a cloud had finally lifted. Kids played outside again, people waved from their porches, and slowly, the community began to feel like a neighborhood instead of a prison. As for the queen, she kept to herself after that night. No more notes, no more roses trimmed with a smirk, no more unearned power. She was just another homeowner now, forced to live under the very rules she'd twisted against others. And while I never rubbed it in her face, I can't deny the satisfaction of knowing I'd done what no one else dared. I'd outsmarted the queen on her own battlefield, and I'd won. Looking back, I learned something important. Bullies don't always wear crowns, but they thrive where people are too afraid to fight back. Knowledge and courage can topple even the most self-appointed rulers. So tell me, what's the worst HOA story you've ever heard? Share it in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe, because this neighborhood might be quiet now, but I've got plenty more stories where this one came from.